had a few people asking about the new rental things. The the facts are there's a lot of changes, and they've actually gone through the government now, and I just want to run through some of them with you because they do have implications for both landlord and tenant. Um, so the first thing is the leases are going to be longer. Now, well, before that, if it already exists, in the sense you already have an agreement, then it doesn't affect this, any new agreements. Now, don't get me wrong, when you renew your contract, then obviously that's starting again. It's a new contract. But this is like ongoing. So you've still got a contract that's ongoing. Now, these are to cut down on the holiday rentals and offer security for tenants. Now, one of the things that has been cropping up in this area, and a few people have had problems with it, is people advertising long-term rentals when they're actually just for holiday rentals. What they're trying to do is not actually comply with the laws that are related to holiday rentals that have been brought in, because they have to get a permit and stuff, because it's sort of treated like a bed and breakfast. As such, it has a little bit more strict rules. And they're advertising long-term rents, and then you move in there. Then after 3 months, they want you to move out because they only actually want a short-term tenant because they're renting out the rest of the time as holiday tenants. Well, they're not supposed to be doing that. And the funny thing is, these new laws may actually impact some of these people that try to do it because the contracts aren't correct. They can't kick you out after 5 months. That's not how it works anymore. Anyway. So the first thing is longer leases. Average tenancy contracts will go from being 3 to 5 years long, or 7 years in cases where the landlord is a legal entity. A legal entity is a business. It's to give greater security to the tenant, but the measure, as is the case with all others, is retrospective. It's not retrospective. So in a sense, it's only relevant to new contracts. In cases where the rent agreement expires and neither the landlord nor the tenant make the intentions vis-a-vis the property now, and the implicit renewal of the contract agreement known as plazo de prórroga tácita in Spanish will now be 3 years rather than 1. Big change there. Longer terms of notice. This affects both parties. After the mandatory renewal period outlined above, the landlords are legally obliged to provide 4 months notice to the end of contract. That's up from 2 months, and in some cases even less than that from stuff I've been hearing. But now you're actually getting the legal contract. Tenants now have to give 2 months instead of 1 month, which, to be honest, in most cases, most people are going to know that they're going to move out unless they've had something unforeseen happen. So, to be fair, you would know. This is also an important bit. Limited rent hikes. The new decree determines the rent is not being increased above the consumer price index, a measure of inflation, bringing an end to contracts that have annual rises written in. Now, the annual rises written in is quite normal on commercial contracts, like businesses and stuff. I'm not going to say which big business had to pay £25,000 for a garden shed on top of the Palisades in Birmingham, but that's a prime example because they gave it they said basically, I'm not going to pay that, because it jumped massively. In the end, the Palisades become quite difficult with parking. Let's do that for another day. Price benchmark system. This is another important bit because one of the big problems you have here is prices can be all over the place sometimes. The decree outlines a new stage benchmark index for rental prices so that the renters can see whether the asking price of the given property is realistic for the area. So you're actually going to get some standardisation across the board. It doesn't start till December 2019. Will provide average prices of rental across Spain based on supply and demand, and will serve as a useful tool to determine whether a rental property is good value. So that's an important bit there, because you can actually gauge the different areas. And I know that's one thing where people are asking me, well, how much is the rent here and here? But at the moment on the coast, the nearer you are to the beach, the more expensive it generally is. The further away, the cheaper it gets. But also the sizes of the properties can change significantly because predominantly on the coast, they are apartments. You go further in, the more houses. The maximum of 2 months deposit. Landlords can be able to ask their tenants for 1 month rent as a deposit, and any additional guarantee will be limited to the equivalent of 2 months rent, unless the tenancy contract is longer than the now 5 years length, because obviously if it's longer than the 5 years, there'll be other implications anyway. Landlords who are a legal entity or companies will now have to cover all agency contract costs by law. Now, to be fair, because we manage the properties here in the sense that it doesn't matter who you are, is sort of part of the maintenance fees, because we charge a little fee on a monthly basis which covers all the maintenance, and it's just part and parcel of managing the property. So you don't actually have any fees with us on that sense anyway. But I know a lot of other people charge €60. But also, you're setting up yourself. The tobacconists actually have a contract for doing rentals in there. You can actually ask them for one. According to the decree, it will now be easier for the landlord and tenant to reach an agreement to revamp or improve the dwelling before the end of the tenancy contract. Because, when you've got an outgoing tenant and a new one coming in, maybe you want to work a deal with them. The outgoing ones give it a lick of paint or something, and you cut them a month's rent or whatever, so that you basically have that quick transition. Up to you. Added protection for tenants. Those who have contracts that have not officially registered with the property registry will be afforded the same legal protection as those that have according to the decree. This means that even if the house is sold with a sitting tenant, the lease agreement must be respected. That gets to the point where I mentioned somebody that moved into a house where the guy that owned the house wanted to move back to the UK, and he wrote a rental agreement with the guy that moved in there, and then he went to the bank and wanted to take the mortgage over, and the bank was sort of stuck with a sitting tenant. That's a prime example of where that can be used, misused. Evictions. In a nation where evictions have become so rife that the new law attempts to limit the damage, all eviction requests must be evaluated by social services to determine whether the tenant is considered in a vulnerable situation. So vulnerable is self-explanatory. It could be that you've got kids, could be that you health issues, could be financially difficult to find a new property. They need to be assessed. If deemed to be so, the tenant will be given a grace period of 1 month or 3 months if the landlord is a commercial enterprise in order to find new accommodation. Also states the date and time of the eviction must be communicated to the tenant via a judge, effectively bringing an end to the surprise evictions that become a notorious thing in Spain. This is an important one, because to get to an eviction point can take ages, because you've got to get all the way through the stages of the legal system. And one of the things, even, I'm not going to say certain police individuals actually advise, is don't call us, deal with it yourselves. Well, that's now going to become illegal. Protection against holiday rentals. The change in the law will allow property owners as a collective to decide whether or not to allow short-term holiday rentals in their building by calling a vote. Bear in mind, that's based on if it's already, the vote is only called for new short rentals. So if it's already existing, it doesn't affect it. It's only if somebody, for example, bought this apartment and decided to make it a holiday rental, it would need the vote of, I think, we'll go down here, 3/4 of the owners in the building to agree to it. For homestay portals such as Airbnb, they'll be able to operate in any given building. 3/4 of the owners that make up the owners of the Residents Association will have to approve this entry. The same ratio will be needed to increase any levies, meaning to cater for short-term holiday rentals in the building. This measure is, again, not retroactive, so it can't apply to any properties currently being rented out for short stays. Now, like I said, a lot of that is actually going to give more protection for tenants. There isn't a lot in there that's going to be beneficial to the landlord. But from a tenant's perspective, one of the things that's been cropping up, and April picked it up on yesterday, is there's a lot more people getting stuck with these long-term rentals, which aren't long-term rentals. They're only renting for a few months, and often in the winter seasons, because the rest of the year it's holiday season, and they are trying to work their way around the system, because a lot of them are illegally renting their property out as a holiday rental, because they do get picked up for it, and they will get hammered with tax if they do get caught doing it. But hey ho, we'll live and learn. But I just want to share that today because I've had a few people ask me about rentals recently, and I just want to say the system is more geared towards a socialist system here in Spain anyway. The government is predominantly socialist. So it was actually pushed through, what's his name? The Prime Minister? Pedro Sanchez. He's pushed this through. And to be honest, I don't see any negative side in this. Even if as a landlord, it's how you would normally find a lot of the agreements in the UK even. But like I said, the one that's a bit scary on there is if you are renting out, if you evicted somebody, you've got to be very careful. If you just went around there and did a dawn raid, threw them out on the street, you could find yourself up in court. Now, I'm not sure what the implications of that are, but it could be expensive. They're actually pushing it in the way that you must go through the court system rather than dealing with matters yourself, which I've seen even on Facebook groups, people talking about bad tenants and how some people just throw them out, other people give them some money to go away. They find another solution because going through the court system, 6 months, a year, who knows? Different areas, no doubt, have different paces depending on how busy the court is. But anyway, thanks for watching.